Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in, and let it go. You are standing in an airport. But not the airport you know, not the rushing, the crowds, the announcements telling you to hurry. This is something else entirely. This is the airport after all of that has stopped. It is somewhere between late and early. That strange, quiet hour that doesn't quite belong to either night or day. The terminals are empty. The departure boards have gone still. The shops are shuttered behind their metal screens, and the rows of seats sit waiting for passengers who won't arrive for hours yet. And in that waiting, you begin to hear something. At first, you might call it silence. But silence, true silence, almost never exists in a place like this. What you're hearing isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of something quieter than noise. Something underneath. Lean into it, and you'll start to find it. There is a hum. Low, and constant, and impossibly steady. It lives somewhere above you, or maybe all around you. It's difficult to tell. It's the building breathing. The vast network of HVAC systems running through the ceiling, through the walls, through corridors you'll never walk down, keeping the air moving, keeping the temperature exactly what it needs to be, whether anyone is here to feel it or not. That hum doesn't care if the terminal is full or empty. It ran last night, and the night before, and it will run long after the first passengers arrive in the morning. It is one of the most constant sounds in the world, and almost no one ever notices it, because when the airport is alive, it is buried under everything else. But now you can hear it clearly. Let it settle around you. Low and even and warm. Take another breath. Let your shoulders drop a little. You begin to walk, slowly, through the terminal. There is no rush. There is nowhere you need to be. Your footsteps fall against the floor, hard, smooth tile, and the sound travels. It moves away from you in every direction, bouncing off the high ceilings, the wide glass windows, the smooth columns rising up through the space. Each step comes back to you a half-second later, softened, stretched, as if the building itself is gently repeating what you've said. You slow down just to hear it. One step, and its echo. One step, and its echo. There is something almost meditative about it. The way this enormous space takes your small, quiet movement and holds it for just a moment, before letting it go. Far ahead, somewhere deeper in the terminal, something shifts. A faint metallic rattle. A luggage trolley, one of the long silver trains left anchored near a pillar, barely disturbed by a drift of air from a vent above it. It rolls half an inch. The chain linking it to the others clicks once, then settles. That's all. Silence returns, or what passes for silence here. You find yourself smiling, just slightly, because you heard it. You noticed it. In the middle of all of this vast, open stillness, that tiny sound found you perfectly, traveled the full length of polished floor between you, and arrived without effort. In a full airport, that sound would not exist. It would be swallowed before it even began, lost under 100 conversations, a dozen rolling suitcases, music leaking from a cafe. But here, in this hour, it had the whole building to itself. Somewhere, you're not sure how far, a speaker hisses softly to life. There's a pause, a breath of static, and then a voice. Calm, clear, unhurried. An automated announcement, rolling through its message in that particular cadence you know so well. The words almost don't matter. It's the tone, measured, even, designed to carry across distance without urgency. It fills the terminal, travels the length of the corridor, passes through you gently, and fades. Then the speaker clicks off, and the hum returns. The ever-present, ever-patient hum. Notice how the space feels around you now. Vast, high-ceilinged. The windows along the far wall are dark, reflecting the terminal back at itself. The rows of empty seats, the cold glow of fluorescent light, your own quiet shape standing in the middle of it all. Outside those windows, the tarmac stretches out into the dark. You can just make out the shape of a plane sitting at a gate, motionless, its wingtip lights blinking slowly in the black. Blink, blink, blink. Steady and slow like a pulse. Like breathing. This is what the airport becomes when no one is watching. Not eerie, not lonely, something closer to peaceful. Something close to suspended. Every surface in this building was designed to manage crowds, to guide thousands of people through a single space without confusion or chaos. And now, with no one to manage, all of that structure simply rests. The signs still glow. The escalators still turn, slow and unhurried, carrying no one upward, no one down. The moving walkway hums along its track, patient and purposeful, ready. Ready for the morning. But not yet. Find a seat if you'd like. One of the long rows near the windows. The fabric is firm and cool, and when you settle into it, the sounds shift slightly. You're lower now, closer to the floor, and the hum from the ceiling is just a little more distant. The reflection in the glass shifts to show you leaning back, relaxed, unhurried. Let your breathing slow to match the room. In and out. In and out. There is nothing leaving tonight. There is no way you are expected. You are simply here, in the in-between, listening to the sound of a building that never quite sleeps, that hums and sighs, and breathes along quietly in the dark, holding this enormous space in stillness, waiting patiently for the morning it knows is coming. You don't have to wait with it. You can simply rest. The hum continues. The trolley sits still. The announcement has long since faded into the walls. Your footsteps are behind you now, their echoes gone. And the airport breathes. And so do you. Stay where you are. Don't move just yet. Keep your eyes closed, your breathing slow, your body settled into that quiet stillness you've found. Because something is happening in this space around you. Something that has always been happening, in every airport, in every terminal, every hour of every day. You've simply never had the chance to hear it so clearly before. You are sitting inside one of the largest acoustic instruments ever built by human hands. Think, for a moment, about the shape of this place. Above you, the ceiling climbs, not the low, close ceiling of a bedroom or an office, but something far more ambitious. 20 meters up, perhaps more, arching overhead in steel and glass and concrete. The architects who designed this space weren't thinking about sound. They were thinking about light, about movement, about the feeling of openness that a traveler needs when they're about to be folded into a narrow metal tube and carried across an ocean. They wanted the terminal to feel like a held breath before a great adventure. And so they built it tall and wide and hard. Hard is the important word. Run your hand along the armrest beneath you. Solid. Cool. Now imagine the floor stretching out ahead. Polished concrete or stone tile, smooth and unyielding. Look up at those windows, vast sheets of glass rising floor to ceiling, holding the darkness of the airfield outside. Every column, every partition, every surface in this building is designed to last, to withstand the weight of millions of footsteps, millions of rolling bags, decades of constant use. Stone, glass, steel, concrete, not a soft surface among them. Now here is what that means for sound. When a sound is born in this room, any sound, even the faintest one, it travels outward in every direction at once, like a ripple moving across the surface of still water. And when that ripple meets a wall, it doesn't stop. It doesn't sink in, doesn't get absorbed, doesn't disappear. It bounces. It reflects back into the room and keeps traveling, meeting the opposite wall, bouncing again, finding the ceiling, the floor, the glass, the columns, and bouncing again, and again, and again. Each reflection is a little quieter than the last, a little softer, but there are so many of them, arriving from so many directions, that they blur together into something continuous, a shimmer, a warmth, a sense that the sound is somehow larger than the thing that made it. This is what acousticians call a live room, a space that holds sound, that lets it move, that gives it room to travel before it finally fades away. And you are sitting in the middle of one of the most live rooms imaginable. In the daytime, you would never know it. When the terminal is full, something extraordinary happens. Or rather, something ordinary. People arrive. Hundreds of them. Thousands on a busy day. And people, it turns out, are remarkable absorbers of sound. The soft tissue of a human body, the fabric of clothing, the padding of a coat, a bag slung over a shoulder, all of it drinks in sound the way a sponge drinks water. Every person in a room is a small piece of acoustic insulation, and when you fill a terminal with them, All of that hard stone and glass and steel is suddenly padded, softened, blanketed. Add to that the noise of conversation, of announcements, of music from shops and cafes, of bags and trolleys and the shuffle of 10,000 shoes, and the reflections are simply buried. They don't stop happening. They were always there. But they're hidden beneath everything else, the way a single voice disappears inside a crowd. But now the crowd is gone. The coats and bags and bodies gone. The cafes are dark and the music is off, and there is not a single soft thing standing between you and the raw acoustics of this place. And so you hear it, that quality in the air, that subtle sense that every sound exists twice, once when it's made, and once more a fraction of a second later, as it comes back to you from somewhere across the room. It's not quite an echo, not the dramatic repetition of a shout in a canyon. It's gentler than that, more diffuse, a kind of elongation, a slight blurring at the edges of every sound, as if the room is holding on to it just a little longer than it needs to. Breathe in slowly, and breathe out. Even that, even your own slow, quiet breath, moves through this space differently than it would in a small room. It expands. It spreads. The room takes it and carries it gently outward, and for just a moment, the air itself seems to shift. Listen to the hum again now. The one that's been here all along, low in the background, steady and unchanging. Hear how it fills the space so completely? That is the HVAC system, yes, but part of what you're hearing is not the machine itself. It's what this room does with the sound of the machine. It takes that low frequency, and it holds it, and reflects it, and layers it back on itself until the hum is not just a hum. It is a presence. A warmth. Something you feel as much as hear. The room is amplifying it. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just holding it. The way a concert hall holds a note a little longer than the instrument alone could manage. A soft creak from somewhere overhead. The metal skin of the roof, cooling now in the night air outside, contracting almost imperceptibly. Just a small structural sigh, the kind of sound old buildings make when no one is listening. But in here it travels. It moves along the ceiling, skips down a column, finds the floor, finds you. By the time it arrives, it has already visited every corner of the room. It has become part of the space. You hear it not as a sound coming from somewhere else. You hear it as a sound coming from everywhere. That is the secret of a place like this, in an hour like this. In a full airport, you move through the sound. You push through it. You are surrounded by it. You half listen to it while you check your phone and find your gate and wonder if you have time for a coffee. The sound is wallpaper. You are barely aware of it. But here, in the empty hours, the relationship reverses. The sound moves through you. It starts somewhere, a hum, a creak, the distant tick of an escalator tooth catching on its comb. And then it travels, and in its traveling, it fills this enormous vessel of glass and stone and steel, and by the time it reaches you, it has already been everywhere. It carries the shape of the room inside it. It tells you, without words, exactly how high the ceiling is, exactly how far the walls are, exactly how much open air exists between you and the dark windows. You are not just hearing sound. You are hearing the room itself. Let that settle. Feel the size of the space around you. Not as something empty, not as something lonely, but as something generous. All of this room, all of this volume, all of these hard and patient surfaces, working together to carry the smallest sounds further than they could ever travel alone. A building this size was made for thousands of people. And tonight, it is doing all of that for you. Every surface listening. Every wall ready to answer. Every reflection finding its way back to where you sit, quiet and still and perfectly, completely at rest. You are not just hearing sound. You are hearing it travel. And it has a long, long way to go. Stay with me. Keep breathing slowly. In and out. Let the weight of your body sink a little deeper into wherever you're resting. You don't need to hold yourself up. You don't need to be ready for anything. There is only this, the hum, the stillness, the vast and patient dark of the terminal around you. And the way that sound in here refuses to simply disappear. You've felt it already, even if you didn't have a name for it. That quality in the air. The way a sound seems to linger a half-breath longer than you expect. the way the room holds on to things. A footstep, a creak, the soft mechanical sigh of a vent. Each one arrives and fades, but fades slowly, like a word spoken quietly in a dream, trailing off at the edges before it's fully gone. There is a name for this. It's called reverberation. Reverberation is one of the oldest sounds in human experience. Older than language, older than music. Our ancestors heard it in caves, in canyons, beneath stone bridges over slow rivers. It is the sound of space itself responding. And what it describes, in its simplest form, is this: the time between a sound being made and that sound finally disappearing. Not the sound stopping. It never stops all at once. It fades. It decays. It moves from something audible into something felt, something sensed, and then slowly into nothing. The length of that journey, that slow, spiraling fade, is the reverberation time. And in a space like this one, that journey is a long one. In a small room, a bedroom say, carpeted, curtained, full of furniture and books and the soft accumulated clutter of a life, sound barely gets started before the room has swallowed it. The walls are close and soft, the ceiling is low, and every surface is ready to absorb. A hand clap in a bedroom lands, and is gone in a fraction of a second. Almost before you've heard it, it's over. The room offers almost no reflection at all. Now imagine that same hand clap in here. It leaves your hands, and it travels outward, fast, invisible, in every direction. It hits the glass and comes back. It reaches the far wall 30, 40 meters away, and comes back. It climbs to the ceiling and returns. And each time it returns, it is not quite gone. It is only quieter. Softer. One more layer, in an accumulating shimmer of reflection upon reflection upon reflection. The sound doesn't stop being that hand clap. It simply becomes more of it. A larger, rounder, more expansive version of that single sharp moment, stretching out across 2, 3, perhaps 4 full seconds before it finally settles back into silence. For seconds is a very long time for a sound to live. Let yourself feel the length of that. Breathe in, hold it for just a moment, and breathe slowly out. That breath, that full, unhurried exhale, lasts about as long as the reverberation of a sound in a space like this one. Long enough to feel. Long enough to follow. Long enough to notice the moment it finally, gently ends. This is what gives an empty airport terminal its particular atmosphere. Not volume. The space is not loud. If anything, it is quieter than almost anywhere you might stand in the waking world. But the sounds that exist here last. They persist. They move through the space like slow waves through deep water, arriving in layers, overlapping softly at the edges, never quite resolving into complete silence before the next small sound begins its own long journey. It is not louder. It just lasts longer. That distinction matters more than it might seem. We are accustomed to sounds that are immediate and decisive. A door closing, a word spoken, a notification chiming. Each one arrives, makes its point, and is gone. We live in a world of short, dry, managed sounds. Offices and homes and cars are all acoustically treated, whether we think of them that way or not. They're designed to be clear, close, efficient, to deliver sound without decoration, without ceremony, without delay. An empty airport terminal does none of that. Here, every sound is given time. It is not rushed from the room. It is allowed to unfold, to move, to visit every surface before it finally agrees to fade. And because of this speech, if there were anyone here to speak, would take on a strange, soft, unfamiliar quality. Words would blur slightly at their edges. Consonants, the crisp hard sounds that give language its shape. The T, the K, the S, would soften and wash together as their reflections arrived a half-beat behind them. Sentences would feel thinner than their meaning, more distant, as if spoken from the far side of a room, even when the speaker was close. Washy. That's the word acousticians sometimes use. A reverberant space makes sound feel washy, like watercolor left in the rain, the edges bleeding softly outward, the sharpness gently, beautifully lost. There is something deeply restful about this, if you let it be. We spend so much of our lives in sharp-edged sound. Alerts and alarms and conversations that demand a response, audio that cuts cleanly through the air and expects you to do something with it immediately. The world of sound that most of us inhabit is a world of precision, dry and clear and efficient and relentless. But here, in this long, slow reverberation, there is nothing to respond to, nothing to pass, nothing to act on. The sounds arrive pre-softened, pre-blurred, already halfway to silence before they reach you. Your brain, which normally works so hard to extract meaning from audio, to separate voices from noise, to catch words, to stay alert, finds almost nothing to grip. And so it begins, very slowly, to let go. Notice that in yourself, if you can. That very slight loosening. The way the sounds around you, the hum, the distant mechanical whisper, whatever small noise the building is making in this moment, feel less like information and more like texture. Less like something to listen to and more like something to rest against. This is what reverberation does, in a space large enough and empty enough to let it fully breathe. It takes sound and it softens it, and stretches it, and returns it to you changed. Not louder, not more insistent, simply longer, more present, more patient than any sound in your ordinary world tends to be. Somewhere in the terminal, a door closes. Perhaps a maintenance door, deep in a corridor somewhere behind the shuttered shops. A solid, definitive sound, heavy and mechanical. And then listen to what happens to it. It doesn't stop. It blooms outward through the terminal, softer with every surface it finds, spreading and thinning and layering back over itself until what was a door is now something entirely different. A warmth in the air, a presence, a vibration that you feel faintly in your chest before it finally dissolves into the background hum. 3 seconds, maybe 4. That one small sound taking its time. And now it is gone. And the hum continues, as it always does, carrying its own long, slow reverberation inside it like a river carrying sediment. Always moving, always reflecting, always slowly, endlessly fading and renewing. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to think about sound waves or reflection coefficients, or the physics of large spaces. All you need to do is feel what your body already knows. That something in this sound, in its length and its softness and its patience, is telling you that there is no urgency here. That the space around you is generous and unhurried. That whatever arrives will be given room. That whatever fades will fade slowly, gently, without being taken before its time. Just like you right now. Settling, slowing, lasting a little longer in this soft, quiet, reverberant dark. Breathe in, and let it linger. Rest here a moment longer. There's no hurry. The terminal breathes around you, that low, constant, patient hum filling the space the way water fills a glass, quietly, completely, right to the edges. Your body is heavier now than it was when you first arrived. Your breath has found its rhythm. The room has found its way into you, and you into it, and there is a kind of settled ease in that, a sense of having arrived somewhere, even though you haven't gone anywhere at all. Stay in it, and listen. Something interesting happens to your hearing in a place like this. It takes a little while, it won't happen all at once. But slowly, as the silence deepens and the familiar noise of the world falls further and further away, your senses begin to recalibrate. The threshold shifts. The bar drops. And sounds that would be utterly invisible to you in any other context, sounds so small they wouldn't register, even slightly, in the noise of a normal day, begin to surface. They rise up through the quiet, the way stars appear after sunset. Not because they've grown brighter, simply because everything else has grown dark. Consider what you are hearing right now, beneath the hum. Perhaps it is the faint tick of a digital clock mounted to a column near the gate, a sound so small it would be laughable in daylight, drowned before it even left its housing. Here it arrives cleanly, with a faint metallic ring, once per second, as dependable and precise as a heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. Each one traveling the full width of the terminal to find you. Or perhaps it is the escalator, still turning slowly at the far end of the terminal. Not the sound of the steps themselves, they are almost nothing. A soft continuous blur, but the mechanism beneath. A faint rhythmic pulse, like something breathing in long slow cycles, as the chain completes its loop again and again and again. It never stops. It doesn't need a reason to continue. It simply turns, because that is what it was built to do. Or perhaps it is something even smaller. A single fluorescent light fitting, somewhere above you, buzzing almost imperceptibly at the very edge of hearing. Not unpleasant, a soft, airy frequency, more felt than heard, a tiny cousin of the great hum that fills the room. It has probably been buzzing for years. In all the hours of all the busy days that have passed through this terminal, not one person has ever noticed it. You notice it now. This is one of the quiet gifts of an empty space. The world is full of sound we never hear, not because it isn't there, but because there is always something louder standing in front of it. Our hearing is a system built for comparison, for contrast, for filtering. It is very good at finding the important sounds in a noisy room and suppressing everything else. It works hard, all the time, making those choices on your behalf without being asked. But take away the noise, the passengers, the announcements, the cafe music, the 10,000 wheels of 10,000 suitcases rolling across 10,000 meters of tile, and the filter relaxes. It has nothing to suppress, and everything it was hiding quietly reappears. The HVAC system alone, that great, constant hum you've been resting against, sits at somewhere around 45 decibels. To put that in perspective, a quiet library runs at about 40. A whisper across a small table is 30. So the background of this space is not, technically, quiet at all. It is measurably, physically present. And yet it feels like silence. Because your brain has done what brains do. It has classified the hum as background, as constant, as unchanging, and it has set it aside. It has moved it from the foreground of your attention into something more like the texture of the air itself. It is no longer a sound you are listening to. It is simply the quality of the room. And against that texture, even the smallest variation becomes vivid. Listen. Somewhere, not far, just around the curve of the terminal, a sound arrives. Footsteps. Not hurried, not heavy. A slow, measured pace, soft-soled shoes on polished tile. Perhaps it is a cleaner on their rounds, or a security officer making their quiet circuit of the gates, or simply someone else drawn into the terminal by the same strange gravity that brought you here. Whoever they are unhurried. They move at the pace of the hour. And in this space, in this silence, those footsteps are extraordinary. Each one lands with a clarity that feels almost intimate. The soft compression of a soul against stone, followed immediately by its echo arriving from every direction at once. A step and its shadow. A sound and its memory. They overlap almost perfectly, but not quite, giving each footfall a slight fullness, a slight roundness, as if the foot has landed on something larger than tile. You listen to them approach, slowly, without thinking about who is making them. They are simply sound. They are simply movement made audible in an empty space, the most human noise in the world, traveling further and more clearly than footsteps have any right to travel. And then they begin to fade as the person turns, or moves on, or passes behind something. They grow softer, step by step, the echo outlasting the sound itself, until the last reflection dissolves back into the hum. And the terminal is as it was. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. A door opens somewhere distant. Not a dramatic sound, not a slam or a crash. Just the soft mechanical release of a latch, a brief rush of air through a new gap in the room, and then the door swinging on its hinges with a low, round groan. It closes. The latch catches again with a clean, definitive click. In the silence that follows, the reverb of that click takes its time. It visits the ceiling. It schemes the glass. It comes back to you smaller and softer and spread wide, like a stone dropped in still water, the rings moving outward until they're too faint to see. And you think, that was just a door. Just a door, closing in an empty corridor. A sound that happens thousands of times a day in a building like this. Unremarkable, unnoticed, irrelevant. Except that here, at this hour, in this particular quality of quiet, it had the whole room to itself. It was not a loud sound. It was simply an unobstructed one. There is a contrast in this that takes a moment to fully hold. The terminal is quiet. There is no question of that. Standing here, you would not describe this as a noisy place. The word that would come to you is still, or hushed, or peaceful. And those words are true. This is one of the quietest versions of this space that you will ever experience. And yet it is never completely silent. It cannot be. The hum ensures that. The escalator turning its slow, continuous loop ensures that. The tick of the clock, the buzz of the light fitting, the gentle structural creaks of a building cooling in the night air, all of these ensure that. There is always something. There is always a layer. The quiet of an empty airport is a particular kind of quiet. Not the quiet of an anechoic chamber, not the quiet of countryside at 3 in the morning with the wind dropped and the birds asleep. It is the quiet of machinery at rest. The quiet of infrastructure ticking over at its minimum. The quiet of a space that was built for intensity and is now, temporarily, breathing easy. It is quiet, yes, but never silent. And somehow that makes it more restful, not less. True silence can be unsettling. Too complete, too still, too unlike anything the human ear has ever really known. But this layered, soft, continuous not quite silence is something the body knows how to receive. It is complex enough to engage the senses without demanding anything from them. It is present without being insistent. It asks nothing of you. It simply continues. Let your awareness soften now. You don't need to identify each sound. You don't need to locate them or name them or understand where they came from. Let them come and go the way clouds move across a darkened sky. Present for a moment, distinct for a moment, and then dissolved back into the general grey. The hum holds everything together beneath it all. Constant. Level. 45 decibels of pure, uninterrupted background. A foundation, a bed, something to rest the smaller sounds upon, and something to rest yourself upon in turn. Feel how steady it is. Feel how it doesn't change. While everything else in the world shifts and starts and stops and demands your attention, this does not. It was here before you arrived. It will be here long after you move on. It is the pulse of the building, running through the walls, through the ducts, through the air around you, warm and low and endlessly, patiently present. A small sound rises briefly above it. Then fades. Another follows. Then fades. The clock ticks. The escalator turns. Somewhere a light hums its barely audible hum. And underneath it all, the great low breath of the building continues, holding all of these tiny sounds the way the ocean holds its surface details, the ripples and the whitecaps and the floating things, while remaining, in its depths, completely still. You are resting inside that stillness now. Small sounds rising and falling around you like breath. The space enormous and unhurried and generous. The quiet alive with everything it contains. But a crowd is also quietly a kind of acoustic warmth. And when it leaves, as it always does eventually, in the deep hours of the night, the room exhales. The reflections lengthen. The decay stretches back out to its natural extent. The room remembers what it is underneath all of that human softness, vast and hard and resonant, a vessel built from materials that want to hold sound, that resist silence, that take every small noise and give it room to travel. The space comes back to itself. It becomes, once more, what you've been resting inside all this time. Breathe in slowly. Feel the size of the room around you. This is the airport without us. Without the crowds and the coats and the rolling cases and the 1,000 soft bodies drinking up its sound. This is the terminal in its truest acoustic state, alive with its own resonance, long and reverberant and still. And it is extraordinary. But it is also temporary. Because somewhere, not too many hours from now, the quiet will begin to lift. Slowly at first, a single member of staff arriving, keys on a lanyard, footsteps crossing the tile with that perfect ringing echo. Then another. Then the shutters coming up on a coffee stand, the grind and hiss of an espresso machine, a radio turned on somewhere in the back. And then the first passengers, dragging cases, checking phones, finding seats. One, and then a few, and then more. The room beginning to warm around them, the reverberation beginning to shorten, the great hollow resonance of the empty terminal quietly, gently, being softened back into something familiar. The airport, filling up with people. The people, without knowing it, filling up the sound. But that is later. That is the morning. and the morning is still a long way off. For now, the room is yours. Long and resonant, and quietly alive. The hum steady in its depths, the reflections moving slowly through the dark, the space in its full, unhurried, human-free reverberation. Rest in it while it lasts. Let it hold you, the way only an empty room truly can. So what happens when the airport comes alive? Let's find out. Let your breathing settle. In and out. Slow and even. The hum is still here, where it always is, low and constant beneath everything, the reliable ground of this quiet space. You know it well now. It has been with you since the beginning, since the first moment you arrived in this empty terminal and began, slowly, to hear what was actually here. Stay with it a little longer, because I want to show you something. Hold two pictures in your mind at once, if you can. Don't strain for them. Let them come softly, the way images come in the early stages of sleep. Suggested rather than forced, impressions rather than details. The first picture is this. Right now, the terminal as it is in this moment, empty and dim, and breathing quietly in the dark. The vast ceiling overhead, the long corridors stretching away in both directions, the floor unmarked by any footstep that hasn't already faded. The hum. The escalator turning at the far end. The occasional small sound rising briefly above the silence, and then dissolving back into it, patient and unhurried, taking its time. You know this picture. You've been living inside it. Now hold the second one alongside it. The same terminal. The same ceiling, the same corridors, the same floor. But now it is 8 in the morning on a busy travel day, and every one of those details has been transformed by the simple fact of people. The check-in desks are staffed and lit, and surrounded by queues that stretch back toward the entrance. Every seat in every gate area is occupied, and the spaces between the seats are occupied too. People standing, leaning against pillars, sitting cross-legged on the floor with their backs against the wall and their headphones in. The cafes are open, all of them, steaming and clattering, and doing the kind of business that justifies the airport prices. Luggage is everywhere, stacked, wheeled, carried, dragged. And the sound of wheels on tile is so constant and so universal that it has become its own kind of white noise, a rolling, clattering undercurrent beneath everything else. And the voices. Dozens of languages, hundreds of conversations, 1,000 individual exchanges happening simultaneously in the same space. Greetings and questions and reassurances and arguments, and the particular urgent half-whisper of someone who has just checked the departures board and found their gate. Hold that picture. Now set them side by side. They are the same room. Identical in every physical respect. Same dimensions, same materials, same hard and reflective surfaces of glass and stone and steel. The ceiling is no lower. The walls are no closer. The geometry of the space has not changed by a single centimeter. And yet they sound completely different. Not just in volume. Though yes, the crowded terminal is louder, significantly louder, in the way that any space full of active speaking, moving people will always be louder than an empty one. That's obvious. That's expected. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what happens to the echo. In the empty terminal, in this one, the one you've been resting inside, every sound travels. You know this now. You've heard it. A footstep and its reflection. A door and its long slow decay. The hum holding the room together in its continuous low resonance. Sound in this space is given time. It is given distance. It reflects and layers and lingers, fading slowly, decorating the air long after the moment that made it has passed. The empty terminal has extraordinary echo. Long, soft, beautiful reverberation. Sound stretched out to its fullest extent, given the full volume of the room to inhabit, meeting nothing soft enough to absorb it before it has completed its natural journey. Now the crowd arrives, and the echo shrinks. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It happens the way dawn happens, gradually, incrementally, each new arrival making a contribution, so small it's almost undetectable on its own. But cumulatively, person by person, coat by coat, bag by bag, the room's reverberation contracts. The long slow decay shortens. 2 seconds becomes 1.5. 1.5 becomes 1. Sound that used to travel the full width of the terminal before fading now meets a body at 10 meters, and another at 15, and loses energy to each of them, and arrives at the far wall already diminished, already quieter, already less capable of a strong reflection. The echo doesn't disappear. It never disappears entirely. The surfaces are too hard, the space too large. But it retreats. It becomes a background quality rather than a foreground presence. It stops being something you hear and becomes something you merely sense, vaguely, in the slight warmth of the room's acoustic character. The crowd has absorbed it, taken it into themselves without knowing it, without meaning to, simply by being there. But here is the trade-off. The crowd has taken the echo and replaced it with something else. Something more immediate, more direct, more insistent. Because while reverberation has decreased, everything else has increased, and increased enormously. The voices, the wheels, the announcements, now more frequent, competing with the ambient noise rather than floating through emptiness. The particular layered chaos of 100 separate sound sources, all operating at once, each one close enough and loud enough to reach you directly. Not as a reflection, not as an echo, but as a raw, unmediated wave of sound arriving at full strength before the room has had any chance to soften it. This is the paradox at the heart of a crowded terminal. It is louder, yes. Significantly louder. Measurably, undeniably louder. The kind of louder that makes you raise your voice to be heard, that makes you lean closer to the person you're talking to, that makes you reach for your headphones before you've even found your seat. But it is less echoey. The noise is bigger, but the sound is drier. More direct. More present. Less decorated by the room, and more simply, flatly, relentlessly there. Empty. More echo. Crowded. More noise. Two different kinds of difficult, if you were trying to have a conversation. Two different kinds of remarkable, if you were simply trying to listen. In the empty terminal, speech blurs. The reflections arrive just behind the words, softening the consonants, washing the edges, making everything feel slightly distant and dreamed. You could hear someone speaking and understand the feeling of it before you understood the words. Language dissolves at the edges and becomes texture. In the crowded terminal, speech is swamped. Not blurred, not softened, simply overrun. Too many sources. Too much direct sound arriving from too many directions. The problem is not that the room is making the words harder to understand. The problem is that there are simply too many words, too close together, competing for the same narrow band of your attention. Two different problems. Two different acoustics. One room. And there is something almost philosophical in that, if you're inclined to find it. The empty space gives everything room to travel, and in doing so, makes individual things harder to grasp, their edges blurred by the very openness that surrounds them. The full space packs everything close together, and in doing so, makes the whole overwhelming. Too much definition, too much immediacy, too many separate things demanding separate attention. The empty terminal is like trying to read a single sentence written in very light ink across a very large page. The space between the words is enormous and beautiful, and the words themselves are faint. The crowded terminal is like trying to read 100 sentences written over the top of each other in dark ink on a small page. Every individual line is clear, but together they are illegible. Neither is comfortable for communication. Both are fascinating to simply be inside. And right now, you are inside the more beautiful one. The empty one. The one with the long echo and the patient hum and the sounds that take their time. The one where the room itself is the main character, where the geometry and the materials and the volumes of air moving through the ducts are more present than any human activity could be. The one where you can hear the building breathe. The crowded terminal will come, as it always does. The people will arrive and their softness will absorb the room's great resonance, and the echo will retreat, and the noise will rise, and the whole vast acoustic instrument of this place will be, for the length of the busy day, essentially muffled by its own audience. But not yet. For now, the room is all echo and no noise. All reflection and no crowd. All that long, slow, patient reverberation moving through the empty air, finding every hard surface, returning changed and softer and quieter, over and over, until it finally fades into the hum that holds everything together. Settle into that now. Let the two pictures in your mind dissolve, the empty and the crowded, the echo and the noise, until only this one remains. This terminal, this hour, this particular quality of sound that exists only in the spaces between the busy times, in the brief windows when the room belongs entirely to itself. More echo, less noise, just the building, and the hum, and the long, slow journey of a sound finding its way home. Let everything soften now. Your breath, your thoughts, the edges of the room around you. Let it all become a little less defined, a little less sharp, a little more like the acoustic of this space itself. Generous at the edges, unhurried, comfortable with a certain beautiful imprecision. You've learned a great deal tonight, without trying to. Simply by being here, simply by listening. You've heard the building breathe. You've felt the reverberation move through the air around you like slow water. You've held the empty terminal and the crowded one side by side and understood, in your body as much as your mind, how profoundly different one room can sound depending on who, or what, is inside it. Now let me tell you why any of this matters. Not just as curiosity, not just as the quiet pleasure of understanding something about the world you hadn't understood before, but why it matters in the most practical, human, everyday sense. Sound is how we navigate. Not the only way. We have eyes and signs and maps, and the particular anxious internal compass of someone who really cannot miss this flight. But sound is older than all of those things. Long before we had written language, or printed signs, or glowing departure boards, we were using sound to locate ourselves in space. To understand how large a place was, how open, how close the walls were, whether we were safe or exposed or hidden. Our ears have been reading rooms for as long as rooms have existed, and they are very, very good at it. What they are less good at, in a space like this one, is passing language. Here is what happens to a spoken word in a long reverberant space. The word leaves a mouth. Let's say it's a simple word, a name, called out across a terminal. The first sounds of it travel directly from the speaker's lips to your ears, clear and unmodified. This is the direct sound. For a fraction of a second, that direct sound is the only thing you're receiving, and it is crisp and legible and completely understandable. But then the reflections begin to arrive. The same word, having taken longer routes, bounced off the floor, off the ceiling, off the glass wall 30 meters to the left, reaches you a few milliseconds later. And then more reflections, having taken even longer routes, arrive a few milliseconds after that. And each one is a copy of the original, slightly quieter, slightly changed by its journey, but still recognizably the same word, overlapping now with the direct sound and with each other. What your brain receives is not one word. It is the same word, arriving multiple times from multiple directions in rapid succession, each copy displaced slightly in time from the one before. And your brain, which is extraordinarily sophisticated in almost every other respect, finds this genuinely difficult. The problem is consonants. Vowels are long sounds open, sustained, full of energy across a wide range of frequencies. They survive reverberation well. They are big enough and long enough to remain recognizable, even when blurred by reflections. But consonants are different. The T in terminal, the K in quiet, the S in silence. These are short, sharp, percussive sounds defined precisely by their brevity, by the way they cut through the air and end. Their meaning lives in their edges. And edges are exactly what reverberation destroys. When a consonant reflects and overlaps with itself, those sharp edges blur. The T becomes softer, less certain, harder to distinguish from a D or a P or nothing at all. The S spreads and washes. The K loses its snap. And by the time all the reflections have arrived and overlapped and washed over each other, what was once a crisp, intelligible word has become something closer to an impression of a word, the vowels still recognizable, but the consonants smeared, uncertain, asking you to fill in the gaps from context. Your brain fills in those gaps. It always does. It is very good at it. But filling in gaps takes effort, and effort, sustained over time, becomes fatigue. You've felt this without knowing you've felt it. You've stood in a large, hard-surface space, a train station, perhaps, or a shopping center atrium, or a church, and heard an announcement, and understood perhaps 2/3 of it, and had to reconstruct the rest from the fragments that arrived clearly. Gate changed. Something. Please proceed. You've nodded and moved, trusting context over comprehension, because comprehension was simply not fully available to you. In a busy airport, during the day, this matters enormously. An announcement about a gate change, a boarding call, a security instruction, these are not decorative sounds. They are information. They are the kind of information that, if missed or misunderstood, means someone misses their flight, or walks to the wrong terminal, or fails to respond to something urgent. And the acoustic of a large, hard, reverberant space works actively against that understanding. Not because the announcement is too quiet, it often isn't, but because the room takes it and blurs it, and layers it back on itself, and by the time it reaches the person it was meant for, it has been softened and stretched, and had its consonants eroded, until what remains is a voice-shaped sound that carries tone and rhythm, but not always meaning. There is a particular stress that comes from this. A subtle, low-level stress that most people never consciously identify, because you can't identify a stress whose source you can't name. You simply feel, in certain spaces, a vague unease. A sense of being slightly overloaded. A background tension that wasn't there when you walked in, but accumulates over minutes and hours spent in a space where the acoustic is working against you, where understanding requires effort and navigation requires concentration, and the simple act of listening is more work than it should be. Airports, for many people, carry this feeling. It's easy to attribute it entirely to the obvious sources: the crowds, the uncertainty of travel, the pressure of schedules and security queues, and the general controlled chaos of moving large numbers of people through a complex space. And those things are real, and they contribute. But underneath all of them, often unnoticed, is the sound. The way the room handles sound. Whether it helps you or hinders you. Whether the acoustic environment supports your ability to understand, to navigate, to feel oriented and calm, or whether it adds a quiet, constant, invisible layer of difficulty to everything you're trying to do. Good sound design, and it is design, as deliberate and considered as the arrangement of the seats or the placement of the signs, changes all of this. Acoustic panels, carefully positioned, that absorb sound in specific frequency ranges without deadening the space entirely. Ceiling baffles that interrupt reflection paths without sacrificing the feeling of openness. PA systems designed not just to be loud, but to be directional, to deliver sound to the people who need to hear it rather than bouncing it indiscriminately around the room. Carpeted zones near seating areas, soft furnishings, the subtle texture of walls that scatter rather than reflect. None of these things are visible, most of the time. You don't walk into a well-designed terminal and think, the acoustics here are excellent. You simply feel, without knowing why, that the space is easier. That announcements reach you clearly, that conversation is less effort, that you can hear the person next to you without leaning in. That something about the room is working with you rather than around you. Comfort and clarity, held together. The acoustic equivalent of good light, something you only truly notice when it's missing. And here, tonight, in the empty terminal, you have been living inside the extreme version of the other thing. The space without any acoustic treatment, without any crowd to soften it, without any of the human softness that the busy day provides. The room in its rawest, most reverberant, most unmediated state. And you know what? It is beautiful. Not comfortable for communication, no. Not a space where you'd want to navigate by sound alone, or rely on understanding every syllable of every announcement, or hold a conversation that mattered. In that sense, the acoustic of this empty terminal is demanding. It blurs. It washes. It asks your brain to work. But you are not communicating tonight. You are not navigating or processing or parsing or responding. You are resting. And for resting, this acoustic is extraordinary. The very qualities that make it difficult for language make it perfect for this. The blurring that erodes consonants also softens hard thoughts. The washing that muddles speech also smooths the jagged edges of a day. The long reverberation that would defeat an announcement lends itself, in this still hour, to something closer to music. The room is not designed for sleep. But somehow, in its emptiness, it becomes a space for it anyway. All that reverb, all that echo, that long slow decay, that patient hum, landing not on someone trying to understand a gate change, but on you. Still, unhurried, with nowhere to be and nothing to pass and no information to extract from the sound around you. Just the feeling of it, just the warmth of it, just the room, holding you in its long slow acoustic embrace, blurring nothing that matters, washing away nothing you need. Breathe in. Let the consonants soften. Let the edges go. Let the sound wash over you the way it was always going to, in a space this large, and this quiet, and this endlessly, patiently reverberant. You don't need to understand it. You only need to feel it. Drift a little deeper now. Let the hum carry you. That low, steady, ever-present frequency beneath everything. Let it become less a sound you're hearing, and more a surface you're resting on. Warm and solid, and completely reliable. It has not changed since you arrived. It will not change. It is the one constant in this shifting, breathing, quietly alive space, and you can trust it completely. Rest your weight against it. And let me tell you about the people who think about this. Somewhere, before this terminal was built, before the first pane of glass was set into its frame, before the first tile was laid, before the escalators were installed, or the departure boards mounted, or the rows of seats bolted into position, a group of people sat around a table and asked a question that almost no one outside their profession ever thinks to ask. What should this place sound like? Not look like? Not feel like? Not how should the light fall, or the wayfinding work, or the retail experience flow? Those questions were being asked too, by other people around other tables. But these particular people, acoustic engineers, sound designers, architects with a specialism in what the ear experiences when the eye is busy with everything else, were asking about sound. Because sound, in a space like this, does not happen by accident. Or rather, it does, and the results of that accident are exactly what you've been experiencing tonight. The long reverberation, the blurred speech, the hollow resonance of an enormous hard room left entirely to its own devices. That is what a terminal sounds like when no one has thought carefully about sound. And most people, standing in the middle of that, would call it a problem. The solution is not silence. This is the first and most important thing to understand about acoustic design in a public space. The goal is never silence. Not in an airport, not in a train station, not in any building that exists to move large numbers of people through it with efficiency and relative calm. Silence, in a space like this, is not achievable and would not be desirable even if it were. The machinery alone prevents it. The infrastructure, the HVAC, the escalators, the electrical systems humming in their conduits, generates a constant acoustic bed that no amount of design can fully eliminate. And even if it could be eliminated, you wouldn't want it. True silence in a large public space feels wrong in a way that is difficult to articulate, but immediately felt. Too empty. Too still. The kind of quiet that raises questions rather than answering them. What the acoustic engineers are designing toward is something more nuanced and more interesting than silence. They are designing a controlled soundscape. The target, for a terminal lounge, a departure gate, a seating area where people will wait for extended periods, is a reverberation time of somewhere between 3/4 of a second and 1.5 seconds. Not the raw 2-3 for seconds of an untreated hard space. But not 0 either. Something in between. Something that preserves enough of the room's natural character, enough of that sense of space and openness, while shortening the decay enough for speech to remain intelligible, for announcements to arrive with their consonants intact, for the space to feel generous without feeling overwhelming. 3/4 of a second to 1.5. Compare that to right now. The empty terminal, untreated or minimally treated, no crowd to help, the full reverberant character of the room on display. For seconds, perhaps more in the highest, largest sections of the terminal. The distance between those numbers, between the designed ideal and the empty acoustic reality, is the distance between comfort and disorientation, between a space that supports you and a space that simply surrounds you. The question is how to close that gap. Look up if you can. In your mind's eye, let your gaze travel upward toward the ceiling, that enormous, ambitious, high-vaulted ceiling that gave this space so much of its grandeur and so much of its acoustic character. And look at what's there, if this terminal has been designed thoughtfully. Not just the raw structural surface, though that may be visible too. Look for the panels. Acoustic ceiling panels. They may be tiled, fitted neatly into a suspended grid, like an oversized version of a standard office ceiling. Each one a carefully engineered sandwich of materials. A hard face to provide visual consistency. A porous core to admit sound. A backing layer that absorbs and dissipates the energy rather than reflecting it back. Or they may be more architectural, shaped, angled, designed to look intentional and beautiful while doing the quiet practical work of shortening the room's reverberation. Each panel is, in essence, a decision. A decision to take some of the sound energy that would otherwise bounce freely around this enormous space and convert it instead into a tiny, imperceptible amount of heat. The sound strikes the panel, enters it, loses energy to the fibers and the air pockets within, and emerges on the other side weakened, less capable of another strong reflection. One step closer to silence. Multiply that by hundreds of panels, across a ceiling the size of a city block, and the cumulative effect is significant. The reverberation time drops. The decay shortens. The room begins to behave less like an enormous stone vessel and more like a managed acoustic environment. Still spacious, still characterful, but controlled. The walls have their own treatment. Not always visible. Sometimes hidden behind cladding, behind the decorative surfaces that give a terminal its visual identity. But within those walls, or fixed to their inner surfaces, are absorbers. Panels of dense mineral wool, or compressed foam, or specialized composite materials, each one tuned to target specific frequency ranges. The low frequencies that make a space feel boomy and indistinct. The mid-frequencies where speech lives, where consonants are made, and where intelligibility is won or lost. The high frequencies that add brightness and energy, but, uncontrolled, can make a large space feel harsh and tiring. Each one chosen for what it does to the sound, not just for how it looks. Each one a small, silent act of acoustic shaping. And then, suspended from the ceiling or mounted at angles along the upper walls, the baffles. Hanging baffles are one of the more visually striking acoustic interventions in a large space. Long, flat panels hung vertically from cables or mounting points, dropping down into the volume of the room like quiet flags. They work by interrupting the path of sound waves that would otherwise travel freely between the floor and the ceiling, bouncing in long arcs that sustain the reverberation. The baffles catch these waves mid-journey. They absorb some energy and scatter the rest, breaking up the clean geometric reflections that a hard floor and a hard ceiling would otherwise sustain between them. In a well-designed terminal, you might not notice them at all. They can be integrated into the architectural language of the space, colored to match the ceiling, shaped to suggest intention, spaced with enough regularity that the eye reads them as design rather than intervention. But the ear notices. The ear always notices, even when the brain doesn't register why. The room feels easier. The sound feels closer, more immediate, less washed out. Words arrive with more of their edges intact. There is something beautiful about this, if you hold it the right way. A team of people, spending months or years thinking about the quality of an experience that most of the people who have it will never consciously register, working with physics and materials and geometry to shape something as intangible as the feeling of a room. Getting it right, truly right, in a way that manifests not as admiration but as absence. The absence of strain. The absence of that low-level acoustic fatigue. The absence of the slight disorientation that a badly managed reverberant space produces. Good acoustic design is invisible. It disappears into the experience it creates. And the experience it creates feels, to the person inside it, like nothing in particular, like simply being in a room that feels right, without knowing why, without needing to know why. In this empty terminal, tonight, you are hearing the room without its full acoustic treatment engaged, or with less of it than the day crowd would provide. The panels are here, perhaps, doing their quiet work. But without the crowd to supplement them, the reverberation is still long, still generous, still more than the designed ideal. And you have made peace with that. More than peace, you have found it restful. You have found in the very qualities that the acoustic engineers work to mitigate a kind of accidental beauty. The long decay, the blurred edges, the hum held by the room and returned to you softened and enlarged. This is not what the engineers were designing for. But the night has made it something else. Taken the raw material of an imperfectly treated space in its empty hours and turned it into exactly the right environment for exactly this. For stillness. For the slow release of the day. For the kind of listening that asks nothing of you, that requires no passing, no response, no effort at all. Just the room, doing what rooms do. Holding sound. Shaping it. Returning it to you changed. The panels absorb a little. The baffles scatter a little. The hum continues, beneath all of it, untroubled. And the reverberation, even shortened, even designed, even carefully managed toward that target of 1 second, of 1.5, is still long enough in the emptiness to feel like something. Long enough to feel like the room is still breathing. Long enough to carry you. Breathe in slowly. And out. You are still here. Still in the terminal. Still held by the hum. Still resting inside this particular quality of quiet that the empty hours provide. The panels are doing their patient work above you. The baffles hang still in the dark. The reverberation moves through the space in long, slow arcs, visiting every surface before it finally concedes to silence. And somewhere in this building, in a room you'll never see, behind a door marked with letters that mean nothing to a passenger, someone is thinking about all of this. Not tonight. Tonight that room is quiet too, its screens dimmed, its systems ticking over on their overnight settings. But during the day, during the busy, complicated hours, when thousands of people move through this space simultaneously, that room is the place where decisions about sound are made. Not what you hear, but where you hear it. For most of the history of public address systems, from the very first crackling loudspeakers mounted in railway stations and bus terminals and airports in the middle of the last century, the approach to announcements was simple and total. Make the sound loud enough that everyone can hear it. Everywhere. All at once. Point the speakers at the ceiling, or distribute them along the length of the terminal, and turn the volume up high enough that the message reaches every corner of the building simultaneously. It was a broadcast model. The same approach used in radio and television, extended into physical space. One source, radiating outward in all directions, reaching everyone whether they needed to hear it or not. It worked, in a fashion. The messages got through, or some of them did, through the reverberation and the crowd noise and the acoustic challenges of the space. And everyone in the terminal heard every announcement, regardless of whether it had anything to do with them. A passenger waiting at gate 47 heard the boarding call for gate 3. The family sitting near the entrance heard the announcement intended for passengers already through security. The person who had just landed, still finding their bearings in the arrivals hall, heard a departure announcement for a flight leaving in 10 minutes from a gate they had no reason to visit. Noise in the truest sense. Information directed at no one in particular, reaching everyone at once. The shift that has happened, gradually, across the last 2 decades, in the smarter terminals of the world's larger airports, is a shift from broadcasting to placing. Sound is no longer sent everywhere. It is sent somewhere. The technology that makes this possible is called a zoned public address system, and the principle behind it is almost elegantly simple once you understand it. Instead of a small number of large, powerful speakers attempting to fill the entire terminal with sound, the system uses a large number of small, precisely aimed speakers distributed throughout the space, each one responsible for a defined zone, a bounded area, a specific population of people who are actually relevant to whatever is being communicated. A boarding call for gate 12 goes to gate 12. to the speakers mounted in the ceiling directly above the seating area at Gate 12, aimed downward at the people sitting below them, delivering the message at a comfortable volume to exactly the people who need to hear it. The passengers at Gate 19 don't hear it. The people in the coffee queue near the security exit don't hear it. The family at the far end of the terminal, waiting for a flight that doesn't leave for 3 hours, sleep on undisturbed. The message is the same message it always was. But it has been moved, placed rather than broadcast, targeted with a precision that the old ceiling-mounted loudspeakers could never have achieved. And in the places the announcement doesn't reach, in the zones where it isn't needed, what remains is something that would have been unimaginable in an airport of 40 years ago. Quiet. Relative quiet, at least. The background hum, always. The ambient sounds of the space, always. But not the announcement. Not the constant interruption of a system designed to reach everyone, whether they were listening or not. The acoustic texture of the terminal, in these unaddressed zones, is left intact. Some airports have gone further still. There are terminals now, significant ones, major international hubs, that have reduced their announcement schedules so dramatically that a passenger might pass through the entire departures process without hearing a single terminal-wide broadcast. Gate changes communicated through the app on your phone, or the screen above your seat, or the alert sent directly to your boarding pass. Boarding calls displayed rather than spoken, a quiet ripple of updated information across the departure boards, reaching the people who are watching without disturbing the people who are not. The question that drove this shift is one that seems obvious once it's been asked, but that took a surprisingly long time to ask properly. Does this announcement need to be a sound? Not. Should this information be communicated? The information still needs to reach the passenger. The gate change still matters. The boarding call still matters. The security instructions still matters enormously. But the question of whether that information needs to arrive as audio, as a voice, broadcast into the air of the terminal, claiming the attention of everyone within range regardless of relevance. That question, asked carefully and answered honestly, turns out to have a different answer than the one that airports operated on for most of their history. Often, the answer is no. Often, a screen is enough. Or a notification. Or the quiet visual update of a departure board. Information delivered to the eye rather than the ear, reaching the people who are looking without imposing on the people who are not. The result, in the terminals that have embraced this approach, is an acoustic environment that is measurably, noticeably calmer. Not silent, never silent, but quieter in the particular way that matters most, which is the absence of constant interruption. The cognitive rest that comes from not having your attention claimed every few minutes by a voice from the ceiling addressing someone else's situation. Your nervous system, it turns out, responds to every announcement whether it concerns you or not. The sound arrives, and your brain wakes slightly, sharpens, attends, checks whether this is relevant, finds it isn't, and releases. That cycle, repeated dozens of times across the hours of a long layover, is genuinely tiring. Not dramatically, not in a way you'd point to and name, but cumulatively, in the slow accumulation of small attentional interruptions, it costs something. Take the announcements away, or reduce them, redirect them, send them only where they're needed, and something lifts. Some small background weight that you hadn't quite registered until it was gone. And then there are the quiet zones. Purpose-built spaces within the terminal, sometimes lounges, sometimes tucked into corners of gate areas, sometimes dedicated rooms, designed not just to reduce noise, but to actively manage the entire sensory environment. Dimmer lighting, softer materials, seating designed for comfort rather than throughput, and sound, or rather, the deliberate reduction of it, managed with the same care that acoustic engineers bring to the terminal at large, but applied with a specific intention. These spaces exist for many reasons. For passengers with sensory sensitivities, for whom the full acoustic and visual intensity of a busy terminal can be not merely uncomfortable, but genuinely overwhelming. For anxious travelers, for tired travelers, for anyone who has spent too long in a space that asks too much and needs somewhere that asks nothing. In some airports, they are called quiet zones. In others, sensory rooms. In others still, they carry no label at all, just a quality, noticeable the moment you cross the threshold, of something having changed. The air is different. The sound is different. The particular texture of the noise, which has been a constant companion through every other part of the terminal, is absent here, and in its absence is something that the body recognizes, immediately, and without needing to be told. Rest. There is a philosophy underneath all of this that goes beyond engineering. It is the idea that sound in a public space is not neutral, that it is not simply background, not simply the inevitable byproduct of a large building full of activity, that it has effects on comfort, on cognition, on stress, on the quality of the hours people spend inside it, that managing it is not an optional refinement, but a fundamental responsibility of the people who design and operate spaces that other people have no choice but to inhabit. You didn't choose the acoustic of this terminal. You arrived here, as passengers always arrive, and the sound was already present, already shaped, already making its effects felt whether you were aware of them or not. The question the designers are asking, the question the sound engineers and the terminal operators and the people in that quiet room full of screens are asking, is what those effects should be, what the sound of this place should do to the people inside it. And the answer they keep arriving at, the more carefully they think about it, is something close to what you've found here tonight. Not silence, not emptiness, but a kind of considered quiet. A soundscape that gives people what they need, information, orientation, the sense of being in a managed and functioning space, without taking more than it needs to. That places sound carefully, deliberately, only where it belongs. That leaves room, in the places it doesn't reach, for the background hum, and the ambient acoustic of the space, and the particular restful quality of a room that is not constantly making demands of you. The terminal around you has found that quality tonight by accident, by emptiness, by the accident of the small hours when the systems tick over quietly, and the announcements have nothing to announce, and the zones are all at rest. But the best terminals in the world are finding it on purpose, designing it in, building it deliberately, asking, at every stage, whether each sound is necessary, and where it belongs, and what it should do, and what should remain when it has done it. Learning, slowly and carefully, what the night already knows. That quiet, placed precisely, is a kind of generosity. That sound, withheld where it isn't needed, is a gift. That the absence of a voice from the ceiling is not a failure of communication. It is communication of a different kind. The message that this moment, this zone, this particular person sitting quietly in this particular seat, does not need to be interrupted, does not need to be addressed, can simply be. And so can you. Simply be, here, in the quiet the terminal has offered you tonight. In the hum and the stillness, and the long, slow, reverberant dark. No announcement coming. No voice from the ceiling. No zone being addressed. Just the sound of the space itself, placed nowhere in particular, belonging to everywhere at once. Carrying you, quietly, further into the night. Stay here. Don't go yet. There is no rush. There is nowhere asking for you. The night is still full and soft and unhurried, and the terminal breathes around you exactly as it has breathed since the moment you arrived. Low and steady, and patient beyond any ordinary measure of patience. The hum holds everything together. The reverberation moves through the dark in its long, slow arcs. The building is exactly what it has always been, and you are exactly where you are, and there is nothing to do with this moment except inhabit it completely. So stay. A little longer. We have come a long way together tonight. You arrived in an empty terminal and heard, for the first time perhaps, what an empty terminal actually sounds like. You listened to the hum beneath the silence, and learned that it wasn't silence at all. You felt the reverberation move through the space, that long, slow, beautiful decay of a sound taking its time, and understood why it moves the way it does. You stood inside one of the largest acoustic instruments ever made by human hands, and heard the room play itself. You held the empty airport and the crowded one side by side, and felt the difference not just intellectually, but in your body. The echo and the noise, two faces of the same space living in completely different acoustic worlds. You understood why the long reverb that makes the empty terminal so restful is the same quality that makes the full terminal so difficult. You heard why consonants blur, and why speech washes, and why, in a space this large and this hard and this resonant, language begins to dissolve at its edges and become something closer to texture than meaning. You thought about the people who design sound, who spend their working lives thinking about panels and baffles and reverberation times, about the difference between 1 second and 3, about what a space should sound like, and what it should do to the people inside it. You understood that the quiet of a well-designed terminal is not an accident, but a decision, a long, careful, iterative decision made by people who take seriously the idea that sound is an experience, and that experience matters. And you heard the smarter terminals, the ones that have learned to place sound rather than broadcast it, to send announcements only where they're needed, to leave the rest of the space in a kind of considered, deliberate quiet that the body recognizes as a gift. All of that has brought you here. To this last thing. The thing underneath all the others. The understanding that has been waiting at the end of this long, quiet journey through the acoustics of an empty space. Are you ready? Breathe in slowly. And out. And let it come. When a terminal is full, when the crowd is here in all its soft, absorbing, energetic, overwhelming presence, the people are the soundscape. It's as simple and as complete as that. The voices, the footsteps, the rolling cases, the clattering cafes, the children and the music and the announcements and the 10,000 overlapping sounds of 10,000 people, all existing simultaneously in the same space. All of that is the sound of the airport. And underneath it, barely detectable, barely relevant, is the building. The building is there. It is always there. The glass and the stone and the steel, and the vast vaulted ceiling with its panels and its baffles, all of it present and doing its patient work. But you cannot hear it. It is buried under the crowd, the way the ocean floor is buried under the water, present, foundational, invisible. The people dominate. The building waits. But in the empty hours, in these hours, the ones you've been living inside tonight, something extraordinary happens. The people leave. One by one, in 2s and 3s, in the final rushes of the last departures and the slow dispersal of the last arrivals, they go. Through the doors, into the night, into taxis and trains, and the particular exhausted relief of a journey ended. The cafes close. The check-in desks go dark. The security lanes fold themselves into stillness. And the last footsteps cross the terminal and fade, and the last voice disappears, and the last rolling case finds its way out into the world. And what remains is the building. Just the building. And now, without the crowd to bury it, the building speaks. Not metaphorically. Not in some vague poetic sense. Literally, physically, acoustically speaks. The sounds that the building makes, the hum of its systems, the creak of its structure, the movement of air through its ducts, the barely there vibration of its electrical infrastructure. All of these sounds, which were always present and always buried, surface into the foreground of the acoustic environment and become the primary thing you hear. The building has been making these sounds every hour of every day for as long as it has stood. They did not begin tonight. They will not end when the morning comes. They are the building's continuous voice, its permanent self-expression, the acoustic signature of everything it is made of and everything it does. You simply could not hear them before. And now you can. But it goes further than that. Further and deeper, and more beautifully strange. Because it is not just the sounds the building makes that reveal themselves in the empty hours. It is the sounds the building shapes. Every sound in this space, every one you've heard tonight, from the first footstep to the distant door to the trolley shifting on its chain, has been shaped by this building. Taken in, reflected, modified, returned to you changed. The reverberation you've been resting inside is not just a property of the sounds themselves. It is a property of the space, of the height of the ceiling and the hardness of the floor and the angle of the walls and the distance between surfaces. Every echo carries within it a precise description of the geometry that created it. Every reflection is a portrait of the surface it came from. Every decay curve, that long, slow fade from sound to silence, encodes the volume of the space, the absorption of its materials, the character of everything that surrounds you. Sound, in a space like this, is not just something that happens in the building. It is a map of the building. Sit with that for a moment. Every time you heard a sound tonight, every footstep, every mechanical sigh, every distant click and creak and hum, you were hearing the architecture. The building, using sound as its medium, describing itself to you in the only language it has. Telling you how tall it is, how wide, how hard its surfaces are, how much air it contains, how it was built, and what it is made of, and how it has been treated. An echolocation you weren't trying to perform. A portrait you weren't trying to see. Just the building, being itself, and the sound carrying that self to you across the empty dark. In a full airport, you are surrounded by people, and the building is a backdrop. A container, the stage on which the human drama plays out, visually present but acoustically submerged. You see the architecture, you move through it, but you don't hear it. Not really, not in any way that reaches you as information rather than background. But here you have heard the architecture. Every hum a structural fact. Every echo a dimensional truth. Every long, slow reverberation a measurement of space, so precise that a trained ear could reconstruct the room from sound alone. Its height, its width, its materials, its geometry, without ever opening their eyes. Close yours a little tighter now. Feel the space around you, not by sight, but by sound. Let the hum tell you how large the room is. Let the faint, distant quality of the escalator tell you how far away it stands. Let the particular warmth of the acoustic, that fullness, that roundness, that sense of sound existing in 3 dimensions rather than arriving flat from a single direction, tell you about the ceiling overhead, high and generous, curving or vaulting or simply vast. You are reading the building. Not with your eyes, not with your hands, with the oldest sense you have, the one that was working before you were born, the one that has been quietly mapping every space you've ever entered without you ever needing to ask it to. Listen, and let the building describe itself to you. There is a kind of wonder in this that feels, at this hour, and in this state of soft, drifting quiet, almost too large to hold. That this building, built for movement, built for transit, built for the urgent practical business of getting people from one part of the world to another, contains, in its emptiness, this acoustic intimacy, this strange, reverberant, unhurried self-disclosure. To this last thing, the thing underneath all the others, the understanding that has been waiting at the end of this long, quiet journey through the acoustics of an empty space. Are you ready? Breathe in slowly, and out, and let it come. When a terminal is full, when the crowd is here in all its soft, absorbing, energetic, overwhelming presence, the people are the soundscape. It's as simple and as complete as that. The voices, the footsteps, the rolling cases, the clattering cafes, the children and the music and the announcements and the 10,000 overlapping sounds of 10,000 people, all existing simultaneously in the same space. All of that is the sound of the airport. And underneath it, barely detectable, barely relevant, is the building. The building is there. It is always there. The glass and the stone and the steel, and the vast vaulted ceiling with its panels and its baffles, all of it present and doing its patient work. But you cannot hear it. It is buried under the crowd, the way the ocean floor is buried under the water, present, foundational, invisible. The people dominate. The building waits. But in the empty hours, in these hours, the ones you've been living inside tonight, something extraordinary happens. The people leave. One by one, in 2s and 3s, in the final rushes of the last departures and the slow dispersal of the last arrivals, they go. Through the doors, into the night, into taxis and trains, and the particular exhausted relief of a journey ended. The cafes close. The check-in desks go dark. The security lanes fold themselves into stillness. And the last footsteps cross the terminal and fade, and the last voice disappears, and the last rolling case finds its way out into the world. And what remains is the building. Just the building. And now, without the crowd to bury it, the building speaks. Not metaphorically. Not in some vague poetic sense. literally, physically, acoustically speaks. The sounds that the building makes, the hum of its systems, the creak of its structure, the movement of air through its ducts, the barely there vibration of its electrical infrastructure. All of these sounds, which were always present and always buried, surface into the foreground of the acoustic environment and become the primary thing you hear. The building has been making these sounds every hour of every day for as long as it has stood. They did not begin tonight. They will not end when the morning comes. They are the building's continuous voice, its permanent self-expression, the acoustic signature of everything it is made of and everything it does. You simply could not hear them before. And now you can. But it goes further than that. Further and deeper and more beautifully strange. Because it is not just the sounds the building makes that reveal themselves in the empty hours. It is the sounds the building shapes. Every sound in this space, every one you've heard tonight, from the first footstep to the distant door to the trolley shifting on its chain, has been shaped by this building. Taken in, reflected, modified, returned to you changed. The reverberation you've been resting inside is not just a property of the sounds themselves. It is a property of the space, of the height of the ceiling and the hardness of the floor and the angle of the walls and the distance between surfaces. Every echo carries within it a precise description of the geometry that created it. Every reflection is a portrait of the surface it came from. Every decay curve, that long slow fade from sound to silence, encodes the volume of the space, the absorption of its materials, the character of everything that surrounds you. Sound, in a space like this, is not just something that happens in the building. It is a map of the building. Sit with that for a moment. Every time you heard a sound tonight, every footstep, every mechanical sigh, every distant click and creak and hum, you were hearing the architecture. The building, using sound as its medium, describing itself to you in the only language it has. Telling you how tall it is, how wide, how hard its surfaces are, how much air it contains, how it was built, and what it is made of, and how it has been treated. An echolocation you weren't trying to perform. A portrait you weren't trying to see. Just the building, being itself, and the sound carrying that self to you across the empty dark. In a full airport, you are surrounded by people, and the building is a backdrop. A container, the stage on which the human drama plays out, visually present but acoustically submerged. You see the architecture, you move through it, but you don't hear it. Not really, not in any way that reaches you as information rather than background. But here you have heard the architecture. Every hum a structural fact. Every echo a dimensional truth. Every long, slow reverberation a measurement of space, so precise that a trained ear could reconstruct the room from sound alone. Its height, its width, its materials, its geometry, without ever opening their eyes. Close yours a little tighter now. Feel the space around you, not by sight, but by sound. Let the hum tell you how large the room is. Let the faint, distant quality of the escalator tell you how far away it stands. Let the particular warmth of the acoustic, that fullness, that roundness, that sense of sound existing in 3 dimensions rather than arriving flat from a single direction, tell you about the ceiling overhead, high and generous, curving or vaulting or simply vast. You are reading the building. Not with your eyes, not with your hands, with the oldest sense you have, the one that was working before you were born, the one that has been quietly mapping every space you've ever entered without you ever needing to ask it to. Listen, and let the building describe itself to you. There is a kind of wonder in this that feels, at this hour, and in this state of soft, drifting quiet, almost too large to hold. That this building, built for movement, built for transit, built for the urgent practical business of getting people from one part of the world to another, contains, in its emptiness, this acoustic intimacy, this strange, reverberant, unhurried self-disclosure. That all the glass and stone and steel, and the 45 decibels of mechanical hum, and the long slow decay of every sound in every corner of the space add up, in the end, to something that feels less like infrastructure and more like presence. The building present. Fully, completely, acoustically present in a way it can never quite be when it is full of people and purpose and noise. An empty airport doesn't just hold sound. It becomes the sound. The hum is not in the building. The hum is the building, expressed as frequency, as vibration, as the continuous acoustic signature of everything running and humming and turning and breathing within the walls. The echo is not a property of the sounds that caused it. It is a property of the space speaking back, the architecture completing every sound with its own reply. The reverberation is not a feature of the air. It is the shape of the room, made audible, the geometry of the place rendered in sound and delivered to you as experience. Every surface listening, every wall answering, the whole enormous space, the glass and the stone and the steel, the panels and the baffles, the ducts and the escalators and the departure boards still glowing softly in the dark. All of it vibrating together, barely perceptibly, at frequencies too low to name, but not too low to feel. The building, singing quietly to itself in the empty hours. And you here, at the still center of it, listening. Let your breath go very slowly now, all the way out. And as you breathe back in, imagine the air itself carrying it. The hum, the warmth, the particular quality of a space that has held 10,000 journeys and released them all, that has been full and emptied, that has heard every language, and every goodbye, and every excited, nervous, exhausted arrival, and has held the sound of all of it in its walls, and its glass, and its high-vaulted ceiling, and has let it all slowly, gently, completely fade. The building remembers nothing, and holds everything. And tonight, in the quiet, it is holding you. The hum continues, as it always has, as it always will. Long after the morning comes, and the crowds return, and the acoustic of the terminal is transformed again by the soft absorbing presence of people. The hum will still be here, beneath all of it, buried but uninterrupted. The foundation, the constant, the lowest note in the building's long, continuous, never-ending chord. You will carry it with you when you go. That frequency, felt more than heard, somewhere at the edge of perception, a warmth in the chest, a steadiness in the air. The sound of a building being exactly what it is, doing exactly what it was made to do, in the simplest and most honest way it knows. Holding space, making room, being quietly and completely itself. Rest now. The terminal breathes. The hum holds. The architecture sings its low, slow, beautiful song into the empty dark. And the dark receives it, and the sound travels, and somewhere in the long reverberant space between one surface and another, between one breath and the next, between the last thing you heard and the soft dissolving edge of sleep, you let go.